Welcome to the Dog Expert Podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. Powered by canineprinciples.com, helping passionate dog people go from feeling unsure and overwhelmed to confident, compassionate and science savvy through a rich library of online courses and formal qualifications. Each week on the podcast, we dive deep into the real, raw and rewarding world of dogs. This isn't about obedience. This is about understanding. Because dogs aren't problems to solve. They're free-thinking, sentient beings to connect with. Hello. Good evening.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Dog Expert Podcast. This is episode 4, and it's all about having a reactive dog and what you do. So little catch up. Emily, how have you been? How's your week?
Good, full on, but amazing. Again, excited for this topic because it's such a common problem. It's one of my favorites, absolutely. And reactivity doesn't necessarily stem from a dog barking and lunging out. Reactivity is your internal driver, right? Whatever reactive responses that are happening in the system that causes the behavior. So it's the dog who is even over-aroused, overly excitable, where you see these excessive excitable behaviors that would also be reactivity in a sense, but it's these heightened emotions from this aspect of reactivity that causes the lunging, aggression, fearful responses. And most of the time it is based in fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if people listening haven't listened before, I guess we should introduce ourselves before I go down a little rabbit hole with that. But also so let's introduce ourselves because I'm going to go down a little rabbit hole otherwise, because this is one of my favourites too.
Yay, one of your favourites.
I know. If you haven't listened before, every week Emily says it's her favourite subject, and I'm like, you can't have them all.
But I can. Says who?
Yeah. So why not? So if you haven't listened before, my name's Jo Middleton, and Emily Dustan and I co-host the Dog Expert Podcast Season 1. I head up Canine Principles. I'm the principal of the International School for Canine Psychology and also director of the International Institute for Canine Ethics. Most of all, I'm just a dog geek, a dog mum, and have worked in rescue for a very long time. Completely obsessed with cognitive-led dog rehabilitation post-trauma. Emily, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, again, I'm Emily Dustan. I own and run See Spot Learn here in Auckland, New Zealand. And my goal is to just help families manage their dog's challenging behavior with the most humane, ethical approach. And I specialize in puppyhood development as well as reactivity and separation and isolation distress.
Fantastic. Before, when we were backstage, Emily posed a really interesting question to myself and our guest expert who's coming on this evening, the fabulous Jay Gurden. And I will tell you more about Jay in just a second. But Emily asked what our favourite dog book was, and that is just sort of how long is a piece of string kind of question.
It really is a difficult answer.
But I didn't have time to answer, so instead of saying what my favourite book is, because I simply can't answer that, there are way too many. It's a bit like every podcast episode subject is Emily's favourite. It's my favourite. But the book that I'm reading at the moment is actually by one of our previous podcast guests, Jessica Pierce. It's called Who's a Good Dog and How to Be a Better Human. And I'm really enjoying it. The way that Jessica writes is just ace. It's just, there's a book that she's written with Mark Beckhoff that's really cool, that the name escapes me right now. You might know it. Where basically it's like, what if there were no humans and dogs were just chilling and just being themselves? What behaviors would we see? What would breeding look like? It's just,
what would be normal, natural behaviors when there's no human influence? Yep.
Yeah, it's just a really cool book. So I was really excited for this one. And Jessica sent me a copy and I'm loving it. It's it's really cool. It's all about a dog called Bella. But anyway, I won't go much, otherwise we will never get to talk about reactivity. What was your favorite book, Em?
Oh, again, like you, there's not about a favorite, but there are definitely two books in my, academic career and studying and learning. One of them was Birch and Bailey, How Dogs Learn. That's because even though I kind of had an idea about things in the background of how we've learned what we've learned about behavior in science, the history to me was really important. And that book was such a great way for me to also help explain to clients certain things and why these methods are outdated. This is what it comes from. That's why it's here today. And this is why we don't do them anymore. So that was really insightful. And okay, so in Afrikaans, we would say Jacques, but I don't know if it's Jacques in English. Jacques. Panskeep is my, I absolutely, that is, again, I can't pick all of them, but that one is right up my alley.
Yeah. And we were saying about how, Jay was saying backstage about how her books, as a published author of some amazing books, and you really must go on Amazon and just type Jay Gurden in and check them out. Building the Bond, the most recent one, is an absolute cracker, but her first book about reactivity just really hits home. But and the other books in between, but I'll let Jay tell you about that. But I've gone off down a little rabbit hole. See, this is
that's okay. That's okay.
About?
We just wing it. We just wing it.
Oh, Panksepp, yes. So yes, it was saying about how with her books she likes to take those more the things that maybe might put some readers off, because you need to read every sentence 5 times before it sinks in, and takes that information and makes it into plain English, really, that we can understand. And that's what Jay's books do. They are just so easy to read compared to
I love that.
Books. Panksepp's like complex to read, though, don't you agree?
Yeah, it would be more, even in the beginning of the book, it says, this book is aimed at teachers or parents. You don't have to, I think in the one of, it's like he says you do not have to memorize every single line. But even if you take away one small thing from this book, it can have an effect on how you approach a behavior because of the emotional influence. But the fact with Jay, that is one of the things I think, and myself included, always strive for, is to give that information in an easy language without overwhelming the person, to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So with no further ado, let's introduce Jay and bring Jay on. So Jay actually began her journey in dog training and behavior as a sheep farmer, working with border collies. Whilst her farming days are behind her now, her passion for understanding dogs and supporting their needs remains stronger than ever. She is a self-proclaimed dog science geek like us, so Jay fits in really well.
Fabulous.
Jay combines hands-on experience with years of study. She is a complete geek like us, to help others build better relations with dogs.
She is an accomplished author, and she's also an educator as a tutor for canine principals in the International School for Canine Psychologies. And her focus is really on empowering others and helping them grow in confidence, as well as educating. She has a particular interest in imposter syndrome, which is rife in the dog world. And so often we see people who are very confident but using outdated methods, having a louder voice than those that are practicing ethically and maybe don't have the confidence because they're struggling with imposter syndrome. So the work that Jay does is really, really important. Reactivity is her niche, and she is here to talk to us all about all things reactivity. So, Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Jay.
Really happy to be here. Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
I'm happy to be here as well.
It's
Hello,
a dog
dogs.
podcast.
I was listening to what you're saying about Panksepp, and actually Panksepp in building the bond.
Ah,
so I
fabulous.
did actually, yeah, there is actually some Panksepp in there, as much as I could get into plain English, because it's not the easiest.
It's not.
No,
it's not. And
no,
one of our
but
previous podcast guests, Linda Michaels, is also in building the bond with her hierarchy of needs, dogs' needs, isn't she?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. She very kindly allowed me to take that and sort of expand on it a little bit as to how it can sort of work with building that relationship with dogs further.
Fantastic.
That is amazing.
So I guess really, because we kind of talked about most other things, we should talk about reactivity, because that's what this podcast episode's about. But as we have learned over the weeks of season 1, we could talk dog all night.
Absolutely.
So Jay, reactivity in my mind is very much misunderstood, and it can be a word that is bandied about when actually it doesn't necessarily mean that the dog is aggressive. It doesn't mean that the dog is broken in some way. How would you define reactivity in behavioural terms?
I have kind of a love-hate relationship with the term reactivity. It's great as a label because people kind of understand it. But what people tend to think of when they think of reactivity is the stereotypical lunging and barking. And it goes so much deeper than that. So I tend to use the word reactive to kind of catch the attention of the people who need to see what I'm talking about. And then once I've got them, and I'm able to speak to them, I kind of switch it to sensitive, complex. For me, reactivity, when you define a reaction, it's sort of a response to something, generally in the environment, at least in the early stages. And that can be anything from a slight startle, a look, right the way up to those big feeling moments, when you do see the barking and the lunging. But the thing is, that generally comes quite a long way after the whole situation's begun. So what is really, really important for me is to help people see those early stages, when the dog is first starting to be worried about something, so that we can avoid that whole getting to that point.
Yep.
Because I've been there. I've been that person on the end of the lead while a dog has been barking and lunging, and it's such a lonely place. So anything that I can do to kind of help stop those dogs and those people from getting there is something that is really, really important for me.
And that's also the next step. Is it's a two-bird, one stone, because with the person that you're trying to help, their emotions amplify their behaviors. They're overwhelmed, they're embarrassed, they feel that their dog's behavior is a poor reflection upon them. So their approach to it is their flight and fight. So it's impulsive, and that's where you get the pulling, the yanking, stop it, no, because they're trying to stop it immediately, because to them, that's their threat, right? That is their threat from their brain. And then sorry, let me just put my coffee cup down. And then what happens is the dog is already dealing with their own thing in their own world, and they're responding to what they perceive as threatening. And it's the circle event, right? The circle of reactivity that just continues. And it's understanding first and foremost. And I can't remember if we were backstage or we were already talking. It's that bond that you have in your book, Jay, with the bond. Now that bond isn't just bond relationship, great, we're best friends, but I love my dog already. The bond also entails safety, because if the dog does not feel safe with you because of previous experiences that could be negative associations, then you are unsafe and unpredictable. So the dog who is already in a distressed state and is not coping, you may unintentionally add more layers to the situation. So it's that bond first, with, as you mentioned earlier, Linda Michael said you could expand on that, which is amazing, because that's why we're all here, for education. And it's that creating that safety in the sense of the bond also entails environmental management, proactive approaches to prevent the rehearsal of that unwanted behavior, putting that dog in a position to continue to rehearse it and fail. And yes, I just want you to say more things because you're amazing. I'm just listening to you and I'm just like, please carry on.
So much of what you said there really, really strikes home with me. I mean, I have, in the last few years, undergone quite a difference actually in the way that I work with reactive dogs, because I started learning about reactive dogs because I had a reactive dog. I think so many of us, we end up finding our niches because that dog finds us, and that dog found me. He's down here asleep at the moment. I love the bones of him. He's not easy. He never will be. But, without him, I wouldn't be here. And I started off writing about reactivity. I first of all started writing because you could find so much content on how to help the dog, but there was nothing to really support the person.
Yes.
So that was the drive of my first book, was just to reach the people like me who just, all of us, it seemed like, in hindsight, I know it's not how it happened, but all of a sudden everything went horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And this is 30 years of working with border collies, and I'd never come across a dog like this. So, if that can happen to me with all those years, it can happen to a lot of people. Mm. But through working with him and letting him teach me what he needs, because he's an interesting dog. He works quite differently to how a lot of the time we recommend people work with reactive dogs. And he is the one who taught me about the importance of that bond. And he has now moved me away from what I used to do, which was all desensitization, counter conditioning. It was all the science backed. I learned with him, he's actually best off if you let him sit and look and think about things, which we always say to people, don't let your dog sit and look at things because they'll fixate. But for this dog and others like him, that's what they need. Yeah. So it's finding what he needs. And through doing that, it impressed on me that there needs to be this bond, especially with these sensitive dogs, because they need to know that mum or dad has got their back.
Yeah.
They need to know that mum and dad will understand. And if they tell us that they're stressed, we will do whatever they need, whether that's get them out
of the situation. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. They can tell us what they need and know that we will take the action that they need. And when you start doing that, you actually find that they can stretch their boundaries that much more, because they know if it gets a bit much, all I've got to do is tell mum and she'll get me out of it.
Yeah.
And so
there are so many things here that I want to talk about. I just can't be quiet anymore.
Yeah. It's your emotional regulation.
Safety.
Yeah.
I think for me, so many things. I feel like I need a pen and paper to take notes. So emotional safety, not just for the dog, but for the human as well. And that's where we need to strip it back to for both, because the human's lack of emotional safety, their fear reaction before anything happens, because they're anticipating something happen, is going to be picked up on the dog, and that's going to have the snowball effect, and that's going to mean that the situation gets exacerbated far more quickly, a bit like a touch paper going up. And then when you're looking at the stripping it back to the emotional safety, making sure that you've got that bond, making sure that you're the ally and the teammate and that person that's with the dog. You are together as a unit, and the dog can trust you to listen when they're saying, no, I don't want to go that way, because they're picking up on something that they're not sure about, and you're not going to force them. You're going to choose to go a different way. And they're able to rely on you to listen and to their micro communications, as well as their bigger, more reactive lunging. You're looking at things further back, and you're picking up on the more subtle behavioral changes, like just an increase in breath rate. I mean, how often I watch my dogs just breathing. They must think I'm a right nutter. But it
also gives you so much insight and information.
Really does. But then the sleep, the nutrition, are they in any pain?
It's a circle.
Because that's going to build and build on that reactivity, and making sure that we're looking for what triggers as well might have created a pattern in the past that they're repeating. When we talk about triggers, Jay, what would you say are the most common triggers?
It's most commonly other dogs. For instance, with my dog, when he was 4.5 months old, he was attacked. That was like the end of his journey. Yeah, he's a bit of a. There are so many factors that can go into a dog becoming reactive, and he is kind of all of them. His mum was nervous. He was ill during the socialization window, so we couldn't take him out and about because they weren't quite sure what it was. They couldn't identify it. Then when he was better, he was just outside the window. We started trying to get him out and about, and in hindsight, maybe pushed it a little bit further than he was able to cope with. And then that was the point at which he got attacked. He got attacked by a big brindle mastiff, and he started off being afraid of big dark dogs. Then it was dark dogs, light dogs, all dogs.
And then it was generalization.
People with dogs, people. He is dog and people reactive. Those are his triggers. Triggers can be anything. You know, I'm sure you guys say, like I do a lot, every dog is individual.
Yep.
And
absolutely,
every dog's triggers will be individual.
And sometimes they won't make sense to the human, and sometimes the human will never even know what triggered it in the first place, and that's okay. But it's the response that is communication. That's what we're
often
watching.
You'll find that people will say, well, it's silly, he's not in any danger, but that doesn't matter from the dog's perspective. That thing is scary,
perceived, real or imagined.
Yeah, but it could be the smell. You don't know.
Yeah, but then kind of learn other triggers as well. For instance, Finn has a pretty good recall, so we do have times when we can have him off lead. He spends most of his time on a long line if there are other people around, but he does get off lead time. But if you call him back suddenly, he goes, "What is it? Where is it? What am I supposed to be bothered?" So he's actually learned that being called back can mean that we've spotted something before he has, so we've had to just keep calling him back just to try and break that pattern, because as soon as you call him back, he's looking for what he's supposed to be bothered about.
Clever dog.
So
so that they can be continually evolving.
And it also depends on the dog's association of the pattern of behavior, right? So if you're always calling ahead of time, it's like the hand in the treat pouch before the trigger comes, then your hand becomes the predictor something scary is coming, and then the dog's looking for it because they're like, oh, you only do that when something scary is about to happen, and that is that cue. Something, oh, my hand's going in the treat pouch, dog's going, oh no, and then you get but I give my dog treats, and it's breaking it down into those little things, because dogs' main form of communication is body language, and they are so good at predicting patterns of behavior. They know, I think I mentioned in the first episode, they know the difference between the walking shoes and the you going to work shoes, and the way that your patterns of behavior, because that is a behavioral response. So
Can we talk about the nervous system a little bit? And this might be your bag, actually, because the role of the nervous system when reactivity is happening with the 5 Fs now, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder how many more Fs. Well, I can think of a few. Maybe not suitable for the podcast. But do you want to expand a bit about what's actually going on in the dog's nervous system when that reactivity is building up and happening?
Well, in the autonomic system, we have our sympathetic and our parasympathetic part, right? And they can fluctuate. And this is all involuntary responses that go with our freeze, flight, fight, fidget, fawn. And everything, and you're talking about responses and triggers, right? These come to receptors, what the dog hears, what the dog sees, also what the dog feels. So when Jay had mentioned earlier, it's from the individual's perspective, real or perceived, it doesn't matter. And as an example for listeners, I am not afraid of snakes. They don't bother me. I've been exposed to them, and through my lifetime, I've been exposed to them enough that I don't get really a startle response from them if I see them. Okay. I might go, oh, there's a snake. Okay, get the pool net. But then I can regulate and adapt to the situation relatively quickly. Now, for a dog, there's influencing factors of genetics. Either they're born with a more heightened response, where that's that sensitivity, right? So they're more heightened to respond to things. The critical stages of puppyhood development are the exposure or the lack thereof. So if they've never been exposed to it, or if they've been isolated and not been exposed during that critical period when their brain is open-minded to novel and new experiences, it changes how they see things, especially if they've never seen something before. Now, when we get that reactive response, it's either stems from that startle response. So I see something or I've heard something, and then your amygdala sets off, which is your alarm system, checks in with your hippocampus, which is where your memory, some of the memory log, and that is a very fast. This is not like, hey, what's going on? Oh, this is what's happening. It's as fast as switching a light on, and that electrical signal will kind of go from seen it, heard it, to, oh, are we in danger? Are we going to die? Oh, yep, we're going to die. Oh, yeah, we could die. And then it travels through your hippoaxis, which is your hypothalamus and pituitary gland, and then that sets off your nervous system. And that is where the dog cannot control if they freeze, go into a state of, I can't deal with this, so I'm just going to close my eyes and avoid it, and everything will be okay, like a deer in the lights. Or it's that, I'm going to get you before you get me to survive. Wah, 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 wah. And or the avoidance of the flight. But the problem lies with the lead, is that the lead restricts the dog's ability to engage or disengage from a perceived threat. So if they can't run away and increase their distance, they're left with what? Look how scary I am. Bark, bark, bark. Stay away from me, to deter the threat.
And then what we need to consider from a guardian perspective, and it is horrific, like when you are out and you've got a reactive dog, you're embarrassed, you're frustrated,
Yes.
you want it to stop. And from a human point of view, knowing all of that stuff's going on inside of the dog's brain and it's outside of the dog's control isn't something that most of us know. So to be able to understand that and to think, okay, so my dog isn't deliberately being difficult, they are having a difficult time themselves, and we need to strip this back to how can I help them and how can I support them, rather than actually putting them in a position where they feel that reacting isn't, where they're going through all of that stuff in their nervous system, and they feel they have no option but to react. Jay, do you still come across a lot of punishment, corrections, dominance, myths, that kind of stuff, harsh handling? Okay, and what are your thoughts?
you still see a lot of people going, they're bad, aggressive. It's getting less slowly.
Okay.
But it is slowly. Okay, from that human perspective, there is that embarrassment, and to be frank, it's humiliating. You're out with your dog, and dogs are supposed to be easy. Anyone can have a dog, and it's there's so much more that goes on than is often the common perception of living with a dog. I have a love-hate relationship with Disney because of what they've told us about dogs. You can have like 104 Dalmatians and it'll be fine.
No, Lassie.
It won't. It would be carnage. The resource
It would be
guarding.
horrendous.
I never thought about the resource guarding with 101 Dalmatians.
Can you imagine? I have 2 dogs, and to be quite honest, they can sort of, that's my toy. No, that's my bulb. That's my cushion. Having like 101 of them, it just doesn't bear thinking about. But there is this perception in media, and not just like facetious ones like that. Lassie, Rin Tin Tin, all of these portrayals of dogs have been that they are easy, and a lot of them are that the dogs are very clever. Now we know that dogs are in fact very clever, but not quite in the way of those portrayals, which it leads us into more complications, because you then, as well as the people who say they're being bad and aggressive, you can sometimes get the people who say they're doing it deliberately, and that they're acting up to get what they want, the dominance thing. And it's trying to get people to understand that actually no, this is more like a phobia. It's unreasoned. There is no reason in a phobia. If you think about, if you're scared of spiders, if someone puts a spider on your shoulder, you're going to freak out. There is no spider.
And that's such a perfect example, because I know, I always get if I ever say this on social media, I get the stop treating dogs like children. No, they are not children. They're not. I'm not ever saying that they are. However, the association, if your child saw a spider and they screamed, would you smack them because they were being naughty?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You go, oh, there's a spider. Come, darling, move this way. The spider's more scared of you than you are of them. And I'm not, and if you translate that to a dog in an animal sense, dog sets off, bark, 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 or reacts or responds. And with talking about what you mentioned earlier with the 101 Dalmatians, I absolutely love that. By the way, I'm going to use that in future.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's that resource guarding is also reactivity, right? Because the dog is protecting what they perceive as valuable. So these stems of reactivity, whatever the dog does, even if it's an involuntary response and the dog is just reacting to survive, because this all stems for survival in our primitive wiring. And like you said earlier, when we're talking about our sympathetic and parasympathetic part of our nervous system, it's our primitive brain, it's our primitive wiring. Live or die, survival of the fittest. And there is no logic, rhyme, or reason to it. It's what the individual perceives as, this could cause me to die. And the brain just goes, you need to survive no matter what it is. And the responses follow. So it's what they also learn in that moment with associative learning that takes place. Because if I growl and you take your hand away from the shoe that smells really nice and delicious to chew, that works. That's how I communicate it to you, that I don't want you coming near my space. So then you get that the dog is being dominant. The dog is trying to control you. The dog is trying to show you that they're leader and take control of an object that's yours. No, the dog is trying to survive because they perceive that as valuable and you're taking it away from them. They've learned. They go, growling makes you go away. Okay, that's how I talk to you. I will growl. And the same goes with the reactivity. Although sometimes that can be a bit more complex, because as the human, as you mentioned earlier, Joe, was the human is embarrassed and startled and they are panicked. So they don't respond appropriately, and it's not intentional. They just don't respond appropriately. And then what happens is they panic, they hear or see that response, and it's just that circle, that whole thing that happens all over again. But again, when it comes to that reactivity, that punishment and correction is still, in my area, and especially in South Africa, it's still very prominent where that advice is given.
So when a dog is displaying behaviour that could be seen as reactive behaviour, if we are not addressing the root cause of why that behaviour is happening, and for me, I always strip it back to that emotional safety and whether the dog has the emotional toolkit to feel safe once you've met the basic needs, obviously, and I put emotional safety in there with that. And if we're not addressing those underlying reasons of why the dog is displaying that reactivity and its nervous system is taking that course, then all we're doing is suppressing that behavior, and we're going to see behavior that is undesired manifesting in other areas as a result. But we're also going to be breaching the bond that we've spoken about. We're going to be damaging its emotional safety rather than making sure that it has those firm foundations to be able to act in a way and stretch itself slightly so that it can become more resilient with time. And we're also putting things on our timeline rather than on the dog's timeline. And one of the things that I see way too often, and I'm sure I've been guilty of it myself, is people moving their dogs to a desired outcome too quickly rather than observing and noting and maybe vlogging a little bit about, just for personal use, not like creating a YouTube channel that's going to go crazy, just a little videos of but you could, of what's going on with the dog's body language, and making sure that if there is a day where things have gone back a few steps, then that's okay. We move backwards to that emotional safety, those underpinning areas that make sure that the dog is able to have the full cognitive function that it needs to be able to deal with things, and its nervous system is able to cope. Well, how would you recommend that someone, what are the first steps, Jay, for someone who's got a dog with reactive behavior?
The first thing for me is teaching people that if your dog is struggling in a situation, the most important thing that you can do for your dog and for yourself is to get out of that situation.
Yes.
Dogs cannot learn when they're in that state. You know, when they're in that panic state, it's just, they are literally in survival mode. There is no learning that can go on. So you need to get them away, get them somewhere to where they can feel safe. And something that surprises a lot of people when I say it, especially considering the fact that I have border collies, don't walk your dog. If your dog is struggling with something and going out on the daily walk is causing you problems, don't walk your dog.
Cortisol holiday.
Yeah. Then when we first started working with him, I think in a month he went out for 2 walks, and he was fine because we did stuff at home. We played games. He had to go at agility, which was fine until he learned that he could jump through the jumps rather than over them, and then that stopped very quickly. Bless intelligent collies. We did lots of brain work, we did scent work, we did scatter feeding, all of these things that are really nice and calming and just kept him away from the outside world. And then when we did walk, we walked at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Yeah, it was absolute pain because it was like October, November, it was wet, it was cold, it was miserable, but he was
dark.
So happy. It was.
But those enrichment activities, those enrichment activities and that mental stimulation will tire them out. I'm sure I've said it before on the podcast, but I'm pretty sure it was Suzanne Clothier years ago, maybe 2015, 2016, said that 10 minutes of mental stimulation is worth an hour's physical. And it does tires them out, but if you're solving the problems with them, you're building that bond literally with the dog and working with them. And it's all
there's one point with Finn where I took him somewhere. It was very, very quiet, but there was a car park that ran along a footpath where there were loads of people and dogs had gone past, and we spent 10 minutes, and in that 10 minutes we went 5 yards, literally, no distance at all. But we got in the car, we came home, and my highly energetic border collie was upside down on the sofa for 2.5 hours, absolutely flat out because he was just so busy processing. And yeah, I one of my favourite things ever to tell people is the sniffari. Just go out and let your dog sniff.
Sniffari. Yep.
Where as much as you can, let them decide where they want to go and sniff. Just 10, 15, 20 minutes.
But
just
so
that
many,
short time of sniffing.
yeah, so many dogs that come to us, so many fosters that come to us don't seem to know how to sniff because they've never been allowed to just explore with their noses like that. And we have to sort of scatter food and treats a little bit and encourage
to teach them,
almost do it with them at first. It sounds crazy, until they get used to doing it for themselves and realize that they're okay, they can do that and it's safe and everything's all right. That's fun. Yeah, it's cool. So you'd say take them away, absolutely. Show them that you are capable of making that decision to take the flight option to keep both of you safe. They don't need to protect you. You are protecting both of you. That's okay. You are able to do that for them. Something that a lot of people don't seem to be aware of is trigger stacking. I wonder if we could pick your brains a little bit about trigger stacking and reactivity, Jay.
I have an example that I use for that I have used in my books. And my example is you're going to the supermarket. Right, you go to the supermarket.
That's perfect.
You get to the end and someone cuts you off in the line. You know, they give you the smile. It's no big deal. They've just got a few bits and pieces. It's fine. It's not a problem. Go back to the start of your trip. You walk out of the front door. Car's got a flat tire. You get going, all the traffic lights are red. You get to the supermarket, there's no spaces in the car park. You have to park right over the other side, and the last space is next to somebody who can't park, so they're hanging over into your space. You go into the shop, you've got that trolley, the one that will not go where you steer it. So by the time you've been around the whole shop, your back's getting sore, your neck's getting sore. You're finally getting to the end, you're in the queue, and this person barges in front of you and gives you this big smug grin. And that's it. But anybody looking on would say that it's come out of nowhere.
Yep.
Exactly like people often will, they don't understand trigger stacking and the lower level signs to look for. You know, it looks like it's come out of nowhere, but it has been building
so much
that
happened prior.
Time. Yeah.
And it's so important because the trigger stacking is those events, those little events, and it happens. It doesn't just happen all in one day, but that is such a great way to help people learn or understand what the trigger stacking is, because it's for the dog's perspective, going out for the walk, you know, sometimes, and you're so right, stopping just for a bit because of to give them that cortisol holiday. Because the dog needs time to breathe, because if you continuously walk, the dog must walk. We must go for walks every day, 2 days a day, every day, walk, walk, walk. The dog is so conflicted when they go out that door of anticipation, over arousal, or fear and excitement. That's already an event on its own. By the time you've got the harness, that is the trigger for the dog. We're going out. All these emotions happening. The door is another event. Going down the road, the dog is anticipating. So we've already got 3 events, or 4 depending on the dog, because the dog is already, depending on the individual, going through conflicting emotions of, I want to go out, I don't want to go out. But there could be something, and I know I'm projecting and I'm just humanizing, but it's the best way to help somebody understand that there's a smell. Oh no, there's someone there. There's a dog. Oh no, now I'm out. The leader's on. Something's going to happen. Something's in the distance. But the smell's so good. And that's where you get those dogs who rush past the roses, but are not relaxed enough to stop and sniff and take their time to smell.
Yeah. And not only are they going through all that emotions, but they've lost their flight option and they can't run away from whatever is spooking them, or whatever perceived threat that there is, because they're tied to you with the lead and they have no choice because you are in control. So I'm not saying you should let them off, but just to understand what's going.
What you can do when you can kind of understand what is going on and you've got the idea of what's happening. A lot of the time with people, and I used to do this myself, when you're out with your dog, something might come and you tense up on the lead.
Yeah.
And you know how sensitive dogs are. They're going to feel that. And then they're going to go, oh, mum's not happy. There's something wrong. What is it? Where is it?
Yeah.
So it goes back to that co-regulation we were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
it's trying to get that co-regulation so you can both be calm. And I recommend the course holiday for the people as well, because trigger stacking happens exactly the same in us as it does.
They also need to breathe. It's, and they need to also know it's okay. This is not forever. It's time to adjust. It's just time to give you both a breather. And I loved what you mentioned earlier when you stopped taking your dog for that walk and you were doing things in between and your dog jumped through the jump. And that really was so, I tried to keep it in the back of my mind so I could say that, because you are also then adjusting as you are learning what works and doesn't work for your dog, and you don't have that added pressure of trying to tackle that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is like the fastest hour of the week, this podcast, because well, it's supposed to be 45 minutes, but 40 to 45 minutes, but we keep running over because we could talk about it all night. So we've actually come to the conclusion that it's really an hour, and then we start running over that. We'll be here all night every week. It'll be amazing. Can we
have reactivity part 2.
Yay! That'd be my favourite subject.
It's my favourite one.
I just want to ask another question before we let Jay go.
Yes, please. So many.
So I'd say that we're all advocate for dogs. Like, we all try our hardest to keep on learning and to show up for our dogs and protect them in this crazy world that we live in. How do you advocate for your dog in public when you've got a reactive dog?
I found this really, really difficult to start with, but I've become quite loud and obnoxious. I have this
Was it one of the Fs? Did you use one of the Fs, Jay? Did you?
Several of them together. On one memorable occasion, I think I swore 30 seconds without repeating a single word.
Ooh.
And without drawing breath. I had this memory of maybe 4 or 5 years ago, walking in some woods near us, and I could hear a lot of dogs, but I could only hear one human voice. So automatically I'm thinking, oh, this could be fun. So
I'm out.
I stopped and just called, "Can you call your dog, please?" And got, "Why?"
Oh.
Because I asked you. And I think in my local village, I'm now known as that one.
That's fun.
I got over the embarrassment of that very, very quickly.
Is that why you're moving?
Yeah. That's why I'm moving like 3 hours away, because everyone knows me around here now. But no, I just, it's really difficult to do at first because, human nature, we don't like to stand out. We don't like to draw attention to ourselves a lot of the time. And I'm quite an introverted person naturally, until you do anything that threatens the happiness of my dogs, at which point one of my friends called me Mama Bear, and it comes out for my dogs. You do not do anything to my dogs, you do not say anything derogatory about my dogs, and you certainly do not threaten my dogs.
Yeah.
So it gets easier with practice, to be honest.
Absolutely. It's rehearsal of behavior. It gets stronger over time.
My other little dog, I've worked really, really hard to have her not have the same issues as him. And a couple of months back, I had her out for a walk, and we walked through a gap from one field into another, and there was a dog walker. She got 4 or 5 dogs, I think, and she walked through the gap into the next field, and one of her dogs turned around and just absolutely, towards us like an arrow. So, and she's walking away and she's going, Angus, 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 Angus. Yeah, I got that the dog's name was Angus. Angus doesn't appear to know that his name was Angus, because he was, and he was barking, he was growling, and I just got her behind me and just stood in between, and big as I could, and in the end, what I ended up doing, I grabbed a handful of treats out of my treat pouch and just lobbed them at 45 degrees.
Yeah.
For him to go, so we could just beat a hasty retreat. Just the dog walker was in the next field. She just absolutely paid no attention whatsoever. I just ducked through the hedge and we carried on.
He's friendly.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. My 2 least favourite words when put together.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I did do that once, advocating for mine. I got the he's friendly, yeah, but I'm not.
I love it. Oh, we need that on a t-shirt.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it.
That's amazing. Oh, Jay, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Where can people find your books? Can you list them all and tell us? I just want to keep you talking for as long as we can. We're not going to let you go.
Part two.
Fine. I'll geek out. I'm up for a part 2 if you want to do a part 2.
Oh, let us know in the comments if you want a part 2 if you're watching this, please.
The first one I wrote was called Fight or Flight, a Reactive Dog Guardian's Handbook. And that is very much the one that was written to support the people and to help them to see where they could find help. I have a book on imposter syndrome, which I know Joe mentioned earlier, for dog people. I have a Facebook group for imposter syndrome for dog people as well. So
I think that should be part of our part 2, because that's so important for people who work in this industry. That would be amazing.
My other pet, love. My other pet. And actually, imposter syndrome and people who have reactive dogs can go quite well together.
Jay, can I just point out, right? Emma and I brainstormed the subject for the podcast.
Have I preempted?
We're in 2028.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, let's do one on imposter syndrome.
We're adding. It's all good. I'm game.
No, I do genuinely think though that if we could help more people to manage their imposter syndrome effectively in the ethical dog space, then ultimately that is going to unlock a massive tidal wave
because
of
it builds their confidence, helps them feel safe, and no learning can take place when one is stressed, because it inhibits learning. So it's
okay, so we're just going to clone Jay, we're going to clone us,
I think Jay and I are going to be besties.
Yay!
I love your stuff as well, so I'm definitely up for that.
I want to be friends.
We're already besties. We're a trio now. Now we're a trio.
Yeah. Musketeers. Other books. The one that probably has had the biggest impact so far will be Understanding Reactive Dogs. That let me get my inner geek out, because that goes into the nervous system, the hormones, the stress response.
So much fun.
I just got my inner nerd out in that book. It was great.
And it's on Audible as well.
It is also on Audible, read by a fantastic narrator. And then the last one that has been released was Building the Bond, which it's not reactive specific, but everything in there applies, because the stronger the relationship you can have with your dog, the more you can help them when they are struggling. Little sneak peek of what's coming up. There is another reactive dog book in the works, and this one is called Supporting a Reactive Dog. So kind of goes with that change in how I work with people and their dogs now, to actually, rather than concentrating on counter conditioning, desensitization, on actually using that bonding relationship and teaching your dog that they can depend on you, that you've got their back.
Yeah.
And ultimately, people get or should get a dog. Well, everyone should get a dog that is a nice person. But people
2 or 3.
4, 5, 6.
Wait, there's
also why we're moving.
That's what my husband always says. One more won't hurt. But people who have a dog and are struggling with reactivity, they genuinely love their dogs, and they genuinely want to have that bond with their dogs that is fun, that is loving, that is a sort of family member, rather than someone that they're really struggling to bond with, and that they're feeling feelings towards that maybe are of frustration and anger, and that that's not what they want. So to have a book that supports the guardian and the dog as a team rather than as a unit, family unit, is fantastic. So exciting.
What I will say to people sometimes is that, you know, the relationship that you have with these dogs, it may not be what you expected. You know, for instance, with Finn, his world is a lot smaller than the average dog, so to speak. Yeah. But he loves his world. He enjoys his world. Yeah, his life is not unfulfilled.
He's safe.
Yeah. And to be honest, you know, my life is fulfilled seeing him feeling safe.
Yeah, 100%.
It's adjusting those expectations.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So if you've enjoyed this week's podcast with the fabulous Jay Gurden, thank you so much for jumping on, Jay. Then please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like and a share on Facebook, over on the Canine Principles page, and on Instagram, share us to wherever you share things on Instagram. I mean, I'm not that down with the kids, I don't know, but I know that you might be able to share something somewhere. And tell all your friends, all your doggy friends, because we are on a mission to make owning a dog, still use it, being a dog guardian, being a pet parent, I'm conditioned, a harmonious two-way street where the dog's emotional safety is paramount. Obviously their physical safety is paramount too, but their emotional safety goes unrecognized, and we need to make sure that we are shouting about how important that is. Coming up next week, we have got resource guarding as our final episode for season 1. The end of season 1.
My favorite.
No way! That's such a surprise.
What a shock.
Do you know, it's one of my favorites too. Fantastic. Right, well, we will see you next episode for resource guarding, and hope you have a wonderful week. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Expert Podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. If you've enjoyed this episode, do come and let us know in our free Facebook group for dog lovers everywhere, Ethical Dog Training with Canine Principles. That way we can make more content like this that you'll love. We would love for you to leave a review on here and hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode.